Every Thursday. Like clockwork. Rain or shine, hail or holiday, Emily had her appointment. She called it her wellness day. The term changed sometimes, alignment, adjustment, specialist, but the pattern never broke. She'd leave work early, grab her little gym bag, swipe on lip gloss she didn't wear for me anymore, and drive across town. Always across town. Too far for just a chiropractor, too much effort for someone who claimed she hated traffic. I hadn't thought much of it at first. After all, people have their routines. And Emily was nothing if not structured: planners, post-its, recurring calendar invites. But it was a slow build, a drip of unease. The kind of feeling that doesn't explode but seeps in through the cracks. The first thing I noticed: her phone was suddenly sacred. She used to leave it on the counter, screen lighting up with mundane notifications. But then, the screen started locking faster. She'd tilt it away, chuckle at texts she never showed me. I figured it was just stress. She said she was trying to take better care of herself, body, mind, all that. Then came the wardrobe shift. Not overnight, but gradually. The sneakers and leggings became full-on outfits, snug blouses, a new fragrance, even lingerie tags in the trash that I hadn't seen modeled at home. She said she was feeling herself again. I wanted to believe it. Still, something itched at the back of my brain. I'd ask how the appointments went, and the answers were vague. Always vague. Same old, back's better, or nothing too exciting. And yet, the effort she put in each week said otherwise. It all came to a head one Thursday afternoon. She rushed out in her usual flurry, kissed my cheek like it was a formality, and left her phone on the kitchen island. Face down, unlocked. I don't know what part of me reached for it, curiosity, maybe desperation, but my thumb hovered before I pressed the power button. No texts. At least not any recent ones. But I had an idea. Our insurance app. The one we both use to track deductible totals and FSA balances. I logged in, heart already beating faster than I wanted to admit. I went to the claims page. Searched her name. Nothing. No visits. No charges. Not a single appointment logged for a chiropractor, or any specialist, for the past 6 months. It didn't make sense. She was going every week. If not for the health benefits, then at least for the copay. But according to our records, she hadn't stepped foot into a medical office since her last dentist cleaning in February. I rechecked the spelling. Switched date filters. Tried different terms. Still nothing. But I did find something. Or rather, someone. A name that popped up months ago under a different claim, an old entry buried among generic line items: Dr. Kyle Bennett, D.C. The D.C. clicked. Chiropractor. The address next to it. A dusty little plaza near the edge of town. Definitely not the wellness center she claimed had eucalyptus towels and juice cleanses. I felt a chill rise through my spine, heavier than any adjustment could fix. Kyle Bennett. The name meant nothing at first. Just another practitioner. But something about it tugged at me. I opened up one of our old photo albums. Emily had loved to scrapbook back when we still did things together. I flipped through pages until I found it. College years. Back before we got married. A picture from some party, red cups, cheap streamers. Emily on a couch, laughing. Leaning into someone I didn't recognize at first. A tall guy with a smug grin and messy hair. On the back, written in her handwriting, me and Kyle, sophomore year. Love. And there it was. The freight train. She wasn't just seeing a chiropractor. She was seeing him. The same man who'd once shared the dorm bed she swore was just a rebound. The same guy she'd unfollowed on Facebook years ago when we got serious. The same Kyle who, apparently, had reappeared under the mask of medical necessity. I sat there, still clutching the phone, barely aware of the light changing outside the kitchen window. My mouth was dry. My stomach knotted. This wasn't suspicion anymore. This was confirmation, quiet, cold, and absolute. Every Thursday. While I was here, doing dishes, fixing her car, cooking dinner, she was across town in some back-office clinic, with someone she'd once loved enough to photograph. She hadn't just lied about appointments. She'd lied about everything. And I hadn't even confronted her yet. I hadn't asked a single question. I didn't need to. The answers were all there, in the absence of records, in the scent of perfume that lingered just a little too long on Thursdays, in the name I buried years ago like it meant nothing. But now, that name might as well have been carved into my chest. And that's when it shifted for me. The grief started to fade, and something else moved in to take its place. Not rage. Not yet. But something sharper. Something far more patient. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need to demand. I just needed to wait. And plan. The idea came to James a few nights after the discovery. He was lying in bed next to Emily, both turned away from each other, silent. She breathed steadily, peacefully, unaware that the man beside her had stopped sleeping days ago. She hadn't asked why. Hadn't noticed the subtle changes in his routine, the early mornings, the quiet stares, the way he kept his distance as though her touch might scorch him. He wasn't going to ask questions. He'd already seen the answers. But he needed confirmation. Not for proof, he had that. Not for clarity, he saw it clearly now. No, what James needed was closure. A final piece to complete the image in his mind. The kind of truth you don't read in insurance claims or photo captions. The kind that kicks you in the chest and dares you to stand up after. So he made the call the next morning, calm and collected. He used a different name. Created a new email. Claimed to be a new patient, tight lower back, sharp pain down the right leg. Happens when I drive too long, he typed. Might be sciatica. He was polite, deferential, just concerned enough to sound like the kind of guy who wouldn't ask too many questions. The response came quickly. An appointment slot opened up for Thursday, of course it was Thursday. Same time Emily always left with her yoga mat and her loose, perfumed cardigan. The building was smaller than James expected. One of those aging strip malls with peeling paint and mismatched signage. Between a vape shop and a nail salon sat a narrow door with frosted glass. Bennett Chiropractic and Wellness. The sign tried to look modern, but the decals were fading, and the wellness part was half scratched off. He stepped inside. The waiting room was bland, pale walls, a few fake plants, a table with outdated fitness magazines. The receptionist glanced up from her desk and gave a once-over. Her smile was professional, but something in her expression shifted, like she recognized him but couldn't place from where. She hesitated, then tapped at her keyboard and nodded toward a clipboard. James filled out the intake form slowly, his mind not on the boxes but on the sounds. Somewhere behind the closed hallway door, muffled voices drifted out, low and rhythmic. Then laughter. Her laugh. That same, sing-song laugh that used to fill their kitchen while she danced barefoot, stirring pasta with one hand and sipping wine with the other. He hadn't heard that laugh in months. Not in their home. Not with him. A nurse eventually led him to a room. Small, sterile, barely decorated. She asked the usual questions, pressure points, sleep habits, scale of 1 to 10, and then said the doctor would be in shortly. James nodded, barely listening. His eyes were fixed on the hallway through the crack left in the door. The footsteps came first. Soft, unhurried. Confident. 2 sets. Familiar rhythm. They stopped just outside the room across from his. Then the voices resumed. Closer now. Intimate. No rustle of folders, no click of a pen. Just whispers, then low chuckles, then something more. A shadow moved past the frosted pane of the door opposite his. A light flicked on. The door didn't close all the way. James waited. Counted the seconds. Forced his breathing to slow. His fingers curled around the paper sheet covering the exam table beneath him. It crinkled softly, like dry leaves underfoot. Curiosity cracked through caution. He rose, careful not to make a sound, and edged toward the door. He leaned slightly, just enough to glimpse the space across the hall through a half-inch of opening. That's when the last flicker of hope died. There she was. Emily. Not seated in a patient chair, not on a treatment table. No gown, no chart, no pretense. She was half undressed, straddling Kyle Bennett like it was the most natural thing in the world. His hands rested on her hips. Her head tilted back, that same laugh escaping her lips as if the world outside didn't exist. They didn't even bother closing the blinds. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a slip of judgment or an emotional breakdown. This was a ritual. A routine. One that had been practiced and perfected over time. James didn't flinch. Didn't make a sound. He stepped back from the door, gently closing it with a slow, silent push. He sat down on the table again, his movements mechanical. His eyes focused on the floor, but his vision blurred. Not from tears, those had already been shed, quietly, over nights filled with unanswered questions. What came now was colder. More final. He waited 5 minutes. Then stood, opened the hallway door, and walked out. The receptionist blinked, confused. He offered a soft nod, apologetic, restrained, and said nothing. He exited the building without once looking back. The sun outside was bright, too bright. The parking lot shimmered with heat, but James felt none of it. He reached his car, opened the door, and sat behind the wheel. The silence was deafening. He stared at the steering wheel for a long time. Not rage. Not grief. Just stillness. Like the moment before a storm breaks. Because now he knew exactly what he was dealing with. Not a wandering heart. Not a bored wife seeking comfort. This was methodical. Calculated. Maintained. She had built a new routine, one that existed outside of the life they shared. And she hadn't just stepped out of bounds. She'd built a whole new field to play on. One where James was neither player nor spectator. That changed now. He started the car, pulled out of the lot, and drove home. The city rolled by in a blur, but the path forward had never been clearer. He didn't speak a word when Emily got back that evening. Didn't need to. She still thought she was playing a secret game. But James? James had just flipped the board. The drive home was quiet, but James barely noticed the world outside the windshield. It wasn't anger that filled the cabin, it was something heavier. Thicker. A kind of mental stillness, like the eye of a hurricane. He gripped the wheel loosely, eyes forward, barely blinking as red lights and crosswalks passed without significance. His mind, however, was sharp. Focused. Not on what had just happened, but on what would come next. He didn't speak when he got home. Emily was in the kitchen, humming a soft tune, one she probably thought made her seem casual, innocent, normal. The sound only confirmed how far from normal everything had become. James climbed the stairs, entered his office, and closed the door behind him with deliberate quiet. He sat at his desk for a long time, letting the chair creak beneath him. His hands rested on the keyboard, unmoving, while the silence in the house settled around him like dust. He breathed in slow, exhaled slower. Then, methodically, he began. The insurance portal was still logged in from the day he'd checked the statements. He pulled it up again, this time with a notebook beside him and a spreadsheet open. Every line item from the last 8 months. He didn't just look for Emily's appointments, he mapped them, time-stamped them, categorized them. There were no claims for actual chiropractic adjustments since January. Yet Emily had missed work every Thursday for the last 5 months. Claimed she was investing in her health. James cross-referenced the dates with emails she'd forwarded, messages to HR noting her appointments, using healthcare provider documentation as the reason for early leave. And then, it got darker. She had been submitting reimbursement forms for travel mileage, claiming she was driving out of network to see a specialist not covered under their main policy. Every Thursday trip was being marked. Calculated. Filed. On paper, it looked legitimate. But without matching doctor visits, the entire trail reeked of fraud. He checked the forms. Attached PDFs. Each one bore Kyle Bennett's letterhead. One document even had what appeared to be a scanned note, a recommendation for continued manual therapy. It was signed. Dated. Professionally formatted. And completely false. James didn't just feel betrayed. He felt disgusted. Not only had she cheated, she had monetized it. Turned deception into a side hustle. His health insurance, his employment benefits, they'd become the funding mechanism for her private little affair. He pulled out a USB drive from his desk drawer and began to copy everything. Claims, email threads, scans. Screenshots of appointment history. Every false note. Every logged mileage entry. By the time the folder was complete, it contained over 60 items. He paused only once, when he opened one of the PDFs and saw a message scribbled in the margin, "Hope this helps, see you Thursday." It wasn't signed, but it didn't need to be. That weekend, he barely slept. Not out of rage. Not even sadness. The emotions had drained out of him like air from a slow leak. What remained was precision. Cold, deliberate movements as he documented the depth of the fraud. He wasn't thinking of revenge. He was thinking of justice, measured, clinical, irreversible. Sunday night, he filed the report. Not under his name. The insurance company's fraud reporting page allowed anonymous submissions. He uploaded the folder, wrote a summary of what he discovered, and clicked Submit. The message box thanked him for his contribution and assured a response within 5 to 10 business days. He stared at the screen for a while after. Not satisfied. Not proud. Just settled. Then, he opened his printer and loaded fresh paper. From the USB, he printed a copy of the fraud report. Cover page. Itemized evidence. Statement of alleged misconduct. He punched 3 neat holes in the left margin and clipped the stack together with a binder. He did it again. A second copy, identical. 2 packages. He took out a black pen. On the first envelope, in clean, blocky letters, he wrote, Dr. Kyle Bennett. On the second, Emily Parker. No return address. No note. No message tucked inside. The contents would speak for themselves. He placed both envelopes on the counter and stared at them. Just thick enough to make someone nervous. Just light enough to slide through a mail slot unnoticed. That night, while Emily was in the shower, he slipped out. Drove to 2 separate post office boxes in different neighborhoods. One in the medical district, the other closer to their home. He watched both envelopes disappear into the slot. Heard the faint metallic thud as they landed in the belly of the box. Then he got back in his car and sat there, hands resting on the wheel, eyes closed. He felt no rush of satisfaction. No thrill. Only silence. The kind that came before the fall. Because the thing about truth, the real kind, is that once you release it, you can't call it back. You can't control where it goes or who it takes down on its way out. And James had just let it loose. Not with a scream. Not with a slap. But with a quiet drop into a steel mailbox. The sound of a strike that neither of them saw coming. And one they'd never forget. 2 weeks. That's how long it took for the truth to arrive. James lived each of those 14 days in near silence, moving through the house like a shadow, deliberate in every step. Emily, on the other hand, had started to unravel. It began slowly, missed calls, more time spent pacing the kitchen with her phone clutched tightly in both hands. She stopped humming in the mornings. Her Thursday routine halted without explanation. The yoga mat stayed in the closet, and the perfume disappeared. James said nothing. He didn't ask questions, didn't pry. He played the role of a man quietly drifting in the current, detached but present. It suited her. She seemed too preoccupied to notice the coldness in his gaze, the way his eyes lingered on her just a little too long, quietly measuring her unease. Then, on a dull Wednesday afternoon, it came. A plain white envelope addressed to Emily arrived in the mailbox. No company logo, just her name in a typed font, the kind used for official mail, medical, legal, unforgiving. James stood by the window as she walked in with the mail tucked under her arm. He saw the moment her eyes landed on it. Her fingers paused, lips parting slightly, a flicker of confusion crossing her face. She opened it standing at the kitchen counter. James didn't have to move to know what was inside. The letter was brief, just a few paragraphs, but its contents hit like a car crash. A formal notice from the insurer. Suspicious activity. An ongoing investigation. Request for verification of submitted documents and proof of legitimate medical necessity for prior claims. She stood frozen for a few seconds, reading it twice. Her shoulders fell, and the color drained from her face so fast it looked like something had physically been pulled from her. The paper trembled in her hand. Then came the stumble. She backed away from the counter like it had burned her, nearly knocking over a chair before vanishing down the hallway. The bedroom door slammed shut seconds later. James stayed where he was, arms crossed. He didn't need to see her face to know what it looked like. Panic. Shame. The sudden weight of consequences no longer hypothetical. An hour later, her phone lit up on the table beside her keys. James didn't need to pick it up to recognize the name. Kyle Bennett. He let it ring. Once. Twice. Then buzzed to voicemail. A beat of silence. Then another call, same name. He turned and walked away. The next morning, the fallout became public. James sat in his car, parked a block away from the clinic. The blinds were down, the open sign unlit. A white sheet of paper was taped to the door, partly obscured by a legal notice. Word spread fast, especially in a city like theirs. By lunch, he'd already overheard 3 different versions of the story in passing conversation at the coffee shop. Kyle Bennett's practice had been flagged for insurance fraud. Several patients were under review. Improper documentation. Conflict of interest. Ethical breaches. The state board was involved. There were whispers of revoked licenses, legal proceedings, civil penalties. Some said he'd skipped town. Others said investigators had already visited his home. James didn't care which version was true. All that mattered was that the damage was real. By that evening, Emily was a wreck. She moved through the house like a ghost, no longer hiding her anxiety. Her phone was glued to her hand, face pale, eyes wide and constantly searching, as if she expected the walls themselves to close in. She tried to talk to James once, maybe twice. Approached him with hesitation, like someone standing on cracked ice. Her mouth moved. Her hands fluttered with nervous energy. But James stood silent, gaze unwavering. She knew. He didn't raise his voice. Didn't call her names or demand an explanation. He didn't have to. The silence between them said it all. And then came the moment. The one she couldn't escape. James let the truth settle, heavy and absolute. He looked her in the eye and let her see it, the knowledge, the betrayal, the finality. She flinched, and for the first time, he saw her not as the woman he married, but as a stranger wearing her skin. He told her what she'd done. Not just to him, but to herself. To their life. To everything they built. The lies, the fraud, the betrayal, it was all hers. And now, so were the consequences. There was no rage in his voice. No drama. Just facts, delivered with the kind of calm that made them hurt even more. Emily didn't argue. She stood there, small, shoulders hunched, eyes damp but no longer defiant. Whatever fire she once used to fuel her double life had gone out, smothered by reality. Later that night, James heard her sobbing through the bedroom wall. He didn't move. He stayed on the couch, staring at the ceiling, blanket pulled over him but offering no warmth. He wasn't the one breaking anymore. That was over. Now, he was just watching her fall apart. Piece by piece. It didn't take long for the rest to fall apart. The letter from the insurance company had been the first crack. Everything after that felt like watching glass splinter under pressure, slow, spreading, impossible to stop once it started. A week after the notice arrived, Emily received an email from HR. James didn't need to ask what it said. He saw it in her face the moment she opened it. The flush that came, then vanished, followed by a quiet stillness he'd come to recognize. She closed her laptop without a word, walked upstairs, and didn't come down for hours. The irony wasn't lost on him. Her wellness trips, those beautifully scheduled, perfectly curated afternoons of betrayal, had been submitted through her company's insurance policy. Her name on every form. Her digital trail laid bare. The fallout was inevitable. Misuse of benefits. Professional misconduct. An ethics committee. She hadn't just broken vows, she'd violated policy. By Monday, her nameplate was gone from the office. Her LinkedIn changed from Senior Operations Manager to a blank title. She stopped taking calls, stopped returning messages. Her phone buzzed constantly for a few days, but gradually, the notifications faded. People knew. And once they did, they backed away, some slowly, some all at once. Her closest friends, the ones who used to crowd the kitchen for wine and long conversations, stopped coming by. There were no invites. No updates. Just silence. And Emily, once the social engine of their household, became a quiet, haunted presence moving through the house like she didn't know where she belonged anymore. Family followed suit. James overheard one heated conversation, her voice rising, cracking, then breaking entirely. The words didn't matter. The result did. Whatever she said, it hadn't changed anything. The people who once defended her had started asking questions. The kind she couldn't answer. Or wouldn't. Kyle Bennett, meanwhile, disappeared entirely. After his clinic was flagged and the investigation opened, his online profiles vanished. The website went offline. The sign above the office removed. A former receptionist told a mutual contact that lawyers had come knocking. State board involvement. Allegations. Ethics violations. The kind of trouble that didn't end with fines, but with permanent damage to a reputation. Some said he fled to another state. Others whispered about an offshore account. James didn't care either way. The man had slipped out of his life as quickly as he'd re-entered it. And now he would stay gone, for good. James didn't confront him. Never picked up the phone. Never sent a message. He let the paper trail speak for itself. And it did, louder than any words could. Then came the final act. James filed for divorce. The paperwork had been ready for weeks. He submitted it without drama. No courtroom showdown. No public battle. Just clean lines, hard facts, and one damning term that said everything without elaboration: irreconcilable fraud. He didn't ask for alimony. Didn't demand extra concessions. But he made it clear what he was keeping. The house. The dog. The accounts tied to his name. His peace. She didn't fight it. Not because she agreed, but because she couldn't. Not with everything else hanging over her. She was already drowning. The divorce was just another wave pulling her under. James moved through it all with calm, silent precision. Never raising his voice. Never pointing fingers. He didn't need to. The truth had done its job. It hadn't just exposed her. It had emptied her. The aftermath was quieter than he expected. There were no final pleas. No sudden apologies. Just a single box of her things left on the porch one Sunday morning. He didn't watch her pack. Didn't watch her leave. Only noticed, hours later, that her car was gone and the house felt lighter. In the weeks that followed, James started to feel his body come back to life. The weight lifted, almost imperceptibly at first. Mornings were no longer thick with suspicion. Evenings no longer heavy with forced small talk and invisible tension. He repainted the guest room. Donated the dining set she insisted on buying. Threw away the soy candles he never liked but lit out of habit. The silence in the house didn't feel empty anymore. It felt earned. He walked the dog every night, down quiet streets where the air was finally sharp and clean. People waved again. Smiled. A few neighbors stopped to ask how he was doing. He kept the answers brief, polite. The full story didn't need telling. Because the best part about justice, the real kind, is that it doesn't need a spotlight. It just needs truth. James never yelled. Never snapped. Never tried to match the lies with anger. He didn't stoop. He rose. And in rising, he watched them fall. Friends often say revenge is best served cold. But what no one talks about is how satisfying it is when truth does all the work. When you don't have to burn down a house, you just quietly remove the foundation and let gravity do the rest. That's what this was. He didn't burn her life down. He handed her the mirror, and watched as she shattered trying to look away.